Today we're diving into the new science of resilience. And it turns out, a lot of what we think we know about bouncing back from tough times might actually be wrong.
You hear it everywhere, right? This idea that the world is so overwhelming, we're all just becoming more fragile. George Bonanno, who's a leading researcher in this field, he points out that this has become a huge cultural trend.
But here's the thing. What if that's not the real story? What if the actual data, from people who have been through the absolute worst things you can imagine, tells a completely different and, frankly, a much more hopeful story?
And that brings us to our first big idea, what's called the resilience paradox. This is where all our usual ideas about what it means to be tough really get flipped upside down. So, get this. This is the single biggest finding from decades of research on trauma. Scientists looked at all the data and found something that just blew them away. Resilience is not some rare special quality. Nope, it's the most common human response to something terrible happening. Most of us, we get through it.
Okay, so if most people are actually resilient, that leads to the big question, right? What is it? What's the secret ingredient that makes someone resilient?
Well, this is where it gets super interesting. For years, we've all been told it's about having these, magic traits, like you've got to be an optimist or you need to have grit. But the research shows those traits, they actually have a surprisingly small effect. They're not very good at predicting who's actually going to be okay when a crisis really hits.
And that is what Bonanno calls the resilience paradox. We think we know what resilience looks like, optimism, grit, all that stuff. But those things are weirdly bad at predicting who actually gets through. And why? Well, because every situation is different. What works for one crisis might be totally useless in another. There's just no one-size-fits-all trait.
So if resilience isn't some fixed trait that you have or you don't, then what on earth is it? Let's jump into section 2, because this is the real key. It's something called adaptive flexibility.
Adaptive flexibility really is the game changer here. See, it's not about who you are, it's about what you do. It's the skill of being able to look at a situation, figure out what it's asking of you, and then pull out the right tool for that specific job. And the most important part? It is a skill. That means it's something you can learn, you can practice, and you can get better at.
But okay, before you can act all flexible, you kind of have to believe that it's even possible. And that brings us to section 3, the flexibility mindset. You can think of this as the fuel for the engine.
I mean, let's be real. Adapting is hard work. To even bother trying, you need to be motivated. You have to believe that your efforts are actually going to make a difference. And the research shows that this motivation really stands on a foundation of 3 core beliefs.
First up, there's optimism. And this is just the basic belief that somehow the future is going to be okay. Second, you need confidence in coping. This is the belief that you have what it takes, that you have tools to deal with whatever is coming your way. And third, there's what's called a challenge orientation. This is where you shift your focus from, oh no, this is a threat, to, okay, this is a challenge. What actions do I need to take to get through it?
All right, so you've got the mindset down. Now we can get practical and move from the why to the how. Let's look at section 4, the flexibility sequence. This is the step-by-step process.
Seriously, think of this as the user manual for resilience. It's not about wishful thinking. It's a real, concrete process you can use to work through a problem.
Okay, so step 1 is context sensitivity. You have to ask yourself, what's the actual problem I can solve right now? Not the big, scary, my life is a disaster problem, but the small one, like I can't fall asleep. Step 2 is your repertoire. You look at all the coping skills you have, your personal toolbox, and you pick one you think might work. And then step 3, and this is maybe the most important part, feedback. You try it out and you honestly ask yourself, is this working? If it is, awesome, keep going. But if it's not, you don't just give up. You loop back to step 2 and try a different tool from the toolbox.
This toolbox metaphor is just perfect, isn't it? We all have one, filled with stuff we've learned our whole lives. The real skill isn't just having the tools. It's knowing when to use the hammer and when to use the screwdriver. It's an active, conscious process.
And that brings us to our final and I think most empowering part of this whole thing. Section 5, you are the driver.
One of the biggest things that gets in our way is what Bonanno calls the fallacy of uniform efficacy. It's a fancy term for a simple idea. This mistaken belief that some coping strategies are always good and others are always bad.
The research just completely demolishes this black and white thinking. Let's take something like suppressing your emotions. We're always told that's unhealthy, right? But in the studies after 9/11, They found that parents who suppressed their own terror so they wouldn't scare their kids, well, that was an incredibly adaptive and resilient thing to do in that moment. It all depends on the context.
Bonanno even has this great phrase for it, coping ugly. It's this idea that sometimes doing the wrong thing, the messy thing, is exactly what you need to do to get through the night. As John Lennon famously sang, whatever gets you through the night, it's all right.
So the huge takeaway here is that this entire framework, the mindset, the sequence, and getting rid of this idea of good or bad coping, it puts you back in the driver's seat. It's the ultimate counter to that cultural story about us being fragile. It gives you a real sense of agency.
And that really brings us to the bottom line. Resilience isn't some magic thing you're either born with or you're not. It's an outcome. It's the result of all the messy trial and error work you do to navigate a tough situation. It's something you build, one flexible choice at a time.
So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a question. Now that you know you can actively grow your ability to cope, what's one new tool, whether it's a new strategy or just a new way of looking at things, that you can add to your own personal resilience toolbox starting today?